If you're not a billionaire, why are you taxed like one? You didn't mismanage the state budget. Why should fixing it fall on you? The flat tax we have is hurting Illinois workers and families, and it's not fixing the budget. New tax money has got to come from somewhere, so why not from the people with the most? Vote yes on the graduated income tax to raise taxes on the top 3%, generate almost $3 billion a year, and protect your retirement income. That's the fair way to fix this.
Hi, I'm Teresa Jones. I'm the Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach from AARP, Illinois. I want to welcome you today to this live discussion on what's the real deal about the graduated tax amendment. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of Americans for more than 60 years. The coronavirus, well, it may have put large parts of our lives on hold, but there's one event that won't delay, and that's the 2020 election. About 230 million Americans will be eligible to vote in what many say is the most important election in recent history. Now, this live show is dedicated to learning more about what is the real deal about the graduated income tax on the 2020 November ballot. And we're going to separate fact from fiction. And we're going to hear from our community and policy experts on how the graduated income tax will help you, the viewers, your family, loved ones, and your community. But let's be honest, there's a lot of mistruths. There's half-truths, exaggerations that are circling around the graduated income tax on our social media pages, TV screens, radio airways between songs, and even our mailbox. And that's why I'm thrilled to be joined today by a panel of experts to clear the air and to find out the real deal on the graduated income tax. First, I'm going to be joined by my colleague at AARP Illinois, Joshua Harris, who is also an Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach. He will discuss the difference between the Illinois current flat tax, and the graduated income tax.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Teresa, and good to be with all of you. So, as many of you may know, or as many of you do know, Illinoisans will vote this November, not just for president or member of Congress, but also a new tax structure for the state. And currently, Illinois, we have a flat tax rate, which means everyone pays the same tax rate no matter how much they earn. So to change the structure to anything else requires a constitutional amendment, which is what we're urging everybody to vote yes on this coming November. So the ballot proposal before voters is to change Illinois tax structure from a flat tax, where everyone pays the same rate regardless of income, to a graduated income tax, which means only the wealthiest 3% in the state of Illinois will pay more. This change will require about 60% of those voting on the ballot question to vote yes, or more than 50% of those voting in the election to vote in favor of moving from a flat tax to a graduated tax. So if neither of those occur, the measure will be voted down and will remain at our current flat tax rate. And I just want to take a moment to talk about why AARP is supporting the graduated income tax. We are fighting for common sense solutions. We want to ensure that these solutions fix our budget crisis without shifting any of that burden to older adults and middle class families and working families all across this great state. And, we believe that changing to a graduated income tax structure, a structure that 32 other states across the country have, is a step in the right direction to fixing this budget crisis that we're in. And we know that this plan is going to protect older taxpayers by not taxing retirement income. I'm going to repeat that again. This plan is going to protect older taxpayers by not taxing retirement income. And only the wealthiest 3% would pay more, which means 97%, I wasn't that good at math, but 97%, the majority, will receive a tax cut. And so AARP Illinois is proud to support this, and we urge all of you out there to vote yes on the graduated income tax amendment. I think we lost Teresa there.
Start over. I'm so sorry I was on mute. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. Like I hear our state director say all the time, that's going to be the most quoted comment of the year. You're on mute. So, but thank you, Josh, for defining the key policy differences between our current income tax structure and the graduated income tax amendment. As you heard, AARP, we urge you to vote yes on the graduated income tax this fall. We're pleased to introduce another one of our panelists, and that's Doris Turner. Mrs. Turner is a City of Springfield alderwoman who represents the 3rd Ward. Welcome, Alderman Turner.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much thank you so much to AARP for providing this forum and an opportunity for people to learn more about the Fair Tax Amendment. As we've heard before, there are a number of things on the ballot to vote for, but I believe that this fair tax reform is one of the ones where we have seen the biggest misquoting of what this actually does any place. And so I just want to reiterate some of what we've already heard, that the fair tax reform is popular, it's necessary, and I believe it's the right thing to do. There are no good arguments against it. So instead, there is a campaign of confusion and scare tactics. And the biggest one is this that there's going to be a tax on retirement income. And I think one of the reasons why they use that scare tactic is because we know that seniors are very high voters. They vote in large numbers. And so they really want to get that scare tactic out to that population of voters. And Illinois is one of just a dozen states that does not tax any retirement income, such as a 401k or an IRA or pension or Social Security benefits, and the fair tax reform will not change that. And I can't say that enough. Will not change that. Will not tax your retirement income. So the old way of taxing income, I believe, is unfair and inadequate. It's unfair because it falls too heavily on low income households who now pay almost double what the wealthiest pay in taxes as a share of their income. And it's inadequate because it doesn't properly fund public services such as education, healthcare, jobs, and services that seniors often depend on, such as home health care and home delivered meals. And it also causes budget deficits at every level of government, which usually end up in harmful cuts and higher property taxes at the local level. And this burden falls especially hard on seniors and low and middle income families. So the fair tax reform is it's a fair way of taxing our citizenry in order to provide much needed services. And if we don't do something to promote this fairness within our taxing system, you're going to see that burden fall even heavier on those least able to pay it. And not only with regard to the money that comes out of their income, but also in the lack of services that they will receive.
Thank you, Alderwoman Turner, for being with us today. Now, if you're joining us today, know that we're here to listen and to talk with you. To join our live conversation, please post your question or comment in the Facebook or YouTube or Twitter feed. This will place your comment or your question in the queue for us to discuss live. I'll do my best, I promise, to get to all your questions or your comments addressed live on the air. Also joining us today for this important discussion about the graduated income tax amendment is Reverend and President of the Peoria NAACP, Marvin Hightower. Welcome, Pastor Hightower.
Well, good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Thank you for holding this very important forum. Um, as been stated, seniors would not see a tax increase on their Social Security or any other retirement income. In fact, the graduated tax amendment would help protect it. Now, I know the narrative has been that it would tax season, but with tax seniors, but we had a Zoom candidates forum last night in which our Senator Dave Kaler, as well as our Representative Jahan Gordon Booth, both reiterated that it would not tax seniors' retirement. It would not tax seniors' Social Security. That is just a half truth, which makes it a whole lie. Now, for our community, it would help fund education, social services, and human services, as been stated. As education goes, my work as president of the NAACP Peoria branch goes in line with the National Association, which is to ensure that all disadvantaged students and students of color are on the path to college or a successful career by ensuring access to great teaching, equitable resources, and challenging curriculum. For too long, our public school systems have been defunded and underfunded, which keeps them at a disadvantage and our community in poverty. And I view education as the 21st century currency to help lift someone as individuals out of poverty. Now, COVID has shined a bright light on the fact when they had to shut down the schools so abruptly in March, it highlighted the disparities of the funding for public education, where schools had to finish school virtually. And a lot of the families, at least in our area, didn't have the basic tools needed, such as internet, such as computers. So it took them a gap to be in order to fill that space. And so hopefully uh, the graduated tax can help provide some funding to those vitally needed services. And as far as social services goes, COVID revealed that we need to properly fund our social service safety net. Those services have a broad range of services to assistance to individuals, families, and the community at large. And I just read an article on how COVID has caused major mental health issues on both young and seniors. So we have to have some way of funding these services, and the graduated income tax could help fund some of these services. And last but not least, human services, which aid individuals with disabilities and homeless, and daycare. That was another big issue when people had to stay at home or when parents had to go to work and leave their children at home because the schools were closed. Now our schools are opening by phases, but still there's a big gap in daycare. So this funding could help fund some of that, as well as veterans and our immigrants. So
Well,
I
thank you,
say,
Pastor.
like everyone else, I'm sorry. I'll just finish with this. I'll say, like everybody else has been saying, vote yes. I've already voted. I early voted, and I already voted yes.
Well, thank you, Pastor Hightower, and thank you for joining us today. So, Josh, can you please clear the air just again on how the graduated income tax will not tax retirement income? And how do we know what sources to trust when it comes to these mistruths? And who can we trust and who we can't trust?
Well, that's a great question, Teresa. And I'll say, well, you can trust us at ARP Illinois. It's unfortunate that the opposition, funded by billionaires, funded by outside donors that don't live in this state, are putting out these mistruths and outright lies. You're seeing it on TV, and you're seeing it on mailers that are coming to your home. AARP strongly opposes any taxation of retirement income. We've done it in the past, and we will continue to oppose any taxation of retirement income. And we wouldn't take on this issue if it meant that this was going to lead a taxation of retirement income in the state of Illinois. But let me be clear that the graduated income tax amendment, what you're voting on right now, what you're voting on November 3rd, if you choose to vote on election day, has nothing to do with the taxation of retirement income. This is to take our taxing structure from a flat tax to a graduated income tax where only the wealthiest 3% in this state will pay more. And this plan protects older taxpayers. It's going to protect your families. And it's going to ensure that you aren't taxed on your Social Security, on your 401ks, on your IRAs, on your pensions.
Thank you, Josh. So let's dive in now and let's get this conversation going with our special and our honored guest. So Alderwoman Turner and Reverend Hightower, can you both discuss what additional benefits the graduated income tax will have in our communities, such as jobs, home and community-based services, home delivered meals, and other essential services? And let's start with you first, Alderwoman Turner, and then Reverend Hightower, you follow.
You know, I think that we all recognize that there are so many needs in our community, and there is only so much funding in order to go around. And I'm going to already speak this into existence. When we pass the fair tax, that will mean that there will be more revenue that will flow into our communities in order to provide expanded services. One of the things that happened with COVID was that it made a significant impact in a lot of different ways. And one of them was that it really showed us the larger realization of the systemic racism that occurs throughout our society in ways in which we sometimes don't even think about. And when you look at the tax code, it's both a system and an instrument of systemic racism. And this racial inequity is furthered by the unfair tax system, where low income and working people now pay twice as much and receive less services. So, in order to ensure that everyone receives the services that they need, we have to do something about building up that tax base. And when you think about it, the individuals and I'm looking at seniors especially. Both ends. It's the seniors and the young people. We have seniors in our community that are homebound, and the only way that they have any interaction with anyone is when they receive their Meals on Wheels, or if they have a home health care worker that comes into their home to help them with their necessary medications and uh, physicians interactions and those kinds of things. And if we don't have adequate funding flowing into our communities for these things, those are the people that are going to suffer. Those are the people that are not going to have their needs met. And then if you look at it from the other end of the spectrum, if we don't have adequate funding, we won't have funding for daycare. People won't be able to go to work, and that becomes a domino effect on our families from the cradle to the grave. If working people cannot have adequate day child care and they can't go to work, then they can't provide for their families. But the bigger impact is that, think about the impact of children within their household not seeing their parents being able to go to work and provide for their families. They don't see that role model. And then that makes them feel like they're inadequate. And they already start off life feeling, that they cannot succeed. And then we look at education. Right now, unfortunately, education, because there is not adequate funding sources, our educational systems are too reliant upon property taxes. So you know what that means. That means that those inner city neighborhoods that don't have a significant tax base are struggling. Those schools are struggling. That means those students are struggling. So it's an inequitable system all the way around. And one of the ways that we can fix that is to have an equitable and fair tax base so that those on the wealthier end pay their fair share. It doesn't make any sense that you have someone like myself that's retired, and I'm making with my retirement income, I'm making less than $100,000 a year flowing into my household, and I'm paying the exact same rate that someone making $1 billion a year flowing into their household. That makes absolutely no sense. And one of the ways that we can make that fairer is to enact the fair tax so that we can change our taxing system.
Yeah, well, let me put it where the goats can get it, so to speak. People are hurting, and from what is being projected, they will be hurting for a very long time because, contrary to popular demand, COVID has not gone anywhere. In fact, it's on the rise in Illinois. The graduated income tax should not be viewed as a handout, but a hand up. This is more than about taxes, tax rates. It's about human beings. Matthew 25, 35, and 36 and verse 40 says this, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And verse 40 says this, assuredly I say unto you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Now, what would Jesus do is more than a saying, it's an action. And voting yes on this graduated income tax amendment would help the least of these, which should be our aspiration in the first place. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alderwoman Turner. So, Pastor Hightower, you again. Discuss now how the additional revenue from the graduated income tax amendment will be used to make investments in services that are important to the community. I think we touched on it a little bit, so if you could just reiterate that again.
Oh, no doubt. It definitely could help on those services, such as the Alderwoman mentioned, daycare. Like I said in my remarks, that daycare is a huge issue in our communities, especially when one or both parents have to work and you've taken on this extra extra cost in the budget, in your budget that you didn't plan for. This kind of just hit us all of a sudden. And now those families are hurting, and those services, daycare, Meals on Wheels, even if the child is in school, you got latchkey because a lot of times the parents' schedules don't line up with the school. So you may have to drop your child off early, or you may have to pick them up a little later. The Meals on Wheels program, people are hungry. People rely on those services. I know that there's food pantries and that, which are good, and places to get that kind of thing, but a lot of people have mobilization issues. They can't get around, and especially for our seniors. So these services, which are vitally needed for human beings, we have to continue to drive that fact. These are human beings that are hurting. And we, as other human beings, are supposed to take care of other human beings.
Thank you for that, Pastor Hightower. Now, Josh, this one's for you. I've heard that from different people that they think that if they vote yes for this graduated income tax, that it will create new powers and privileges for lawmakers. So my question is, does it? Does the graduated income tax create any new powers or privileges for lawmakers regarding taxation?
Simply put, no. And look, I get it. You know, people want to know, will this give lawmakers the ability to raise my taxes? You know, even if we move to a graduated income tax, will my taxes continue to go up year in and year out? And look, elected officials already have the authority to raise your taxes. They can do it right now if they wanted to. But if they do so, your taxes would be raised under a flat tax system where everybody, regardless of income, is paying the same. That's why we're urging everybody to move to this graduated income tax system, where it's actually less likely that your taxes will be raised than more likely. There was research from the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability that showed states with graduated income taxes are more than twice as likely to cut taxes on the middle class than they are to raise them. And they have cut taxes nearly 2.5 times more often than they've raised them on the middle class, which is why we need everybody to go out and vote yes for the graduated income tax amendment.
Thank you. Now, Alderwoman Turner, isn't it true that shifting our tax structure to a graduated income tax is a step in the right direction to reducing racial disparities in Illinois?
I think it's definitely a step in the right direction in reducing racial disparities. I can't talk this morning. Because as I talked about, we have seen these racial inequities in our systems for a long time. But one of the things that has happened with COVID is that onion, the skin on that onion has been peeled off, and we see it more readily because people are feeling it. When you see that there aren't enough hospital beds, and when you see that there's not health care in certain communities, most especially communities of color, when you see that when children are forced into remote learning, that they don't have the appropriate infrastructure in order to support that. If we have this fair tax that's enacted, what that means is that the state will be able to pay their bills, which means that there will be more funding opportunities available to support local governments, which means that all of these things that we're talking about with regard to public health, education, and infrastructure needs, will be able to support those. And we won't be, again, so reliant upon property taxes and local governments to support that whole burden. And I think that that's especially important. We have to look at how state and local governments work in tandem with each other in order to support the needs of our communities. And one of the ways that we do that is if we have a fair tax and everyone is paying their fair share, and that burden is equally placed amongst everyone. Um, we we see now how that tax burden falls more heavily on those, again, on the lower end of the income and wealth spectrum. And that's inherently unfair, and it doesn't provide the necessary income in order to meet all of our needs. So we have to allow for those that are most able to pay their fair share. And I think it's important that I'm not saying that we should not overly tax the wealthy. Um, I'm just saying that everyone needs to pay their fair share, and it's not fair that a person who's making $30,000 is paying the same exact rate as a person that's making $230,000. And it just puts in more of a burden on, again, those least able to pay. And when you think about that, that's money that's coming out of someone's food budget. That's money that's coming out of someone's ability to provide a roof over their head. That's money that's coming out of someone's ability to send their children to school or to college. So the only thing that the fair tax is doing, and I'm so happy that they made it plain in their advertisement when they call it the fair tax, because that's exactly what it's trying to do, is to make our taxing system more fair.
Thank you, Alderwoman Turner. So quickly, because we're running out of time, you both can answer this. Can you discuss, Pastor Hightower, can you discuss how the African American Black vote will be a game changer for this election, and how the community
Oh, no.
vote yes
Go ahead.
for the graduated income tax amendment? You both can answer on that, starting with you, Pastor Hightower.
Well, I'll say this. It's immoral for the working poor and the middle class to be carrying the bulk of the state's tax load while millionaires and billionaires get a pass. Now, for us as a Black community, this should fully engage us because it will affect us the most. This graduated income tax amendment is designed to close the gap that's so vitally needed. And it's important for us to get out the vote and vote yes for the fair tax.
I think that one of the things that needs to be said is that if we look at this fair tax, it's not only going to improve the lives of the African American community from a holistic standpoint, it's also going to improve our communities from an economic development standpoint. A fair tax will bring in much needed revenue to get our state back on track and keep families in Illinois. which will build that tax base. The other thing that'll happen is that it will provide more money for local schools, infrastructure, public health. And when we do that, then that entices businesses to not only come into Illinois and build their businesses, but also to come into those more impoverished areas and provide economic development to help build those communities. And that's what we need. We need a boost to help build those communities. If I look at the community that I represent, Ward 3 in the city of Springfield, if we have an influx of economic development in our community, then that means that the people who live there, their lives become better. We see better infrastructure, we see better roads, we see more opportunities for growth. We see all of those things grow. So if we want to grow our communities, then we need to be out here actively promoting a vote yes on the fair tax.
Well, thank you, Alderwoman Turner, Reverend Hightower, and Josh. Thank you guys for joining us today. This has been an excellent conversation. And we want to thank you, AARP members and listeners, for participating in this discussion. This has been an informative discussion, and I'm sorry to say that we're at the end of our time for this call. I do apologize if we weren't able to answer your question, but if you had a question and it was not addressed, please go to www.aarp.org/il. And for the most recent and up-to-date information, you can also call us at 1-888-687-2277. To calculate how the graduated income tax would impact you, visit illinois.gov/fair tax calculator. So now we hope that you learned something new and you got your answers regarding the real deal about the graduated income tax ballot initiative. Please vote yes, and vote yes for the graduated income tax. And that means you'd have to vote. So make sure that you guys go out there and vote. It's very important this year, as it is every other year. Again, AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization that's been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. Today's live conversation on the graduated income tax amendment was paid for by Yes to a Financially Responsible Illinois. Thank you. Have a great day. Be well. And this concludes today's live conversation.